It's this key of, it's not a difficult conversation if you have care at the heart of it.
Yeah.
It's your story or assessment that you have about what this conversation means for you that's going to stop you from having it.
And Paula, might I say to Chris, I actually am declaring Paula the queen of these tough conversations. So it's coming from a really good space and a long history of being engaged in these difficult conversations. So listen up.
Well, I actually love them. I think that these are the kinds of conversations.
That's the weird thing about it, right?
Well, they liberate you.
Yeah, they do.
You're going to stay stuck with that awful feeling, or you're going to talk it out. Put the other person and care for the other person at the heart of the conversation, which is completely counterintuitive. Remember, you're starting this conversation because trust is broken or something's not meeting your conditions or your standards. So it's a very big leap to go from, hey, this is the reason I'm having the conversation, yet I want to care for you. This is a really important piece of work. Being able to find a way to humanize that other person and say, if I was the recipient of the conversation I'm about to have, how would I like to be cared for? So another tip before even embarking on the conversation practice itself. Language, mood, and tone are king in the delivery. So as soon as you start to be in the zone of aggression or resentment, it shows up in the mood, it shows up in the tone, and it's never going to be helpful. The idea is to move into a more constructive mood space. Ambition. Wonder. I wonder how this will go. Ambition. Let's do it. Let's give it a go. I know something can be constructive and more positive. Acceptance. This is where we're at now. Let's see where we can get to. And even I feel as I'm saying those words, my entire physiology is changing because I start to soften my stance a little bit and I start to get out of the old place I might have been stuck. So,
hey, Paula, that's a really good point too around acceptance, because sometimes, acceptance, where we're at with the other person, but it might also mean acceptance where I'm at because, we actually don't know what role we've played in that breakdown and the breach of trust or whatever that is. So completely accepting that can be really helpful in terms of opening that space of conversation in a safe and constructive way.
Now, in one instance, we're going to start by sharing some evidence that we have, if we have evidence. So there's two pathways. Do you have evidence that you can use to ground the conversation or do you not? And there are two very different conversations that you could shape up from there. Let's assume that you've got something that's quite tangible that you can start with as a beautiful opening. And the reason you use something tangible to start with is to create some shared understanding at the very start. You're not going in to oppose this person. You are going into conversation to build mutuality from the very start and then to open out possibilities. So I'll say it again. You're going in to start by building mutuality at the start. So you're both on the same page reasonably quickly. And then to open possibilities.
Yeah, and what strikes me in that too, you probably wouldn't have this conversation if you didn't care and you didn't want to strike, some sort of a deal, some sort of a shared understanding and moving forward.
Yeah.
Wouldn't even be a concern to you if you didn't care.
No, and I think the question is, how many of us slow down enough to pay attention to the emotion that has us to know that there's a conversation there? Because these come up all the time every day. It's just that we don't slow down and pay attention to them. And then if we did, we'd probably prevent disruptions around trust and relationship breakdowns, as well as miscoordination, as well as time we waste in rework. There's so much potential in this conversation.
And that's another podcast.
It really is. So let's talk about the conversation starters. And it depends on you. You are going to stylize this, and this is the invitation to use your wisdom and all of your history and also the knowing of the other person in how stylistically you want to approach this. The most simple opening would be something like, can we take some time to begin to speak about something that's concerning me? Pause. Let the other person accept. This is a request you're making. It's not a demand for a conversation. Pause. A variation on that is, I'd like to have a chat about something that's beginning to concern me, but up to now I haven't known how. And so because I haven't known how, this might be a bit clunky, but the reason I'm having this is that I want to build trust and I want to build a better relationship. I can't imagine many humans that would actually say no to that. And although they might breathe and think, oh, here it comes, you're starting to do this in a more constructive way.
Yeah, I really like that because, you're revealing yourself and what's important for you in the conversation, in even having this conversation. So, I've heard some people say, oh, well, you're leaving yourself open a little bit more. But, I think it really depends on what is it that you really want? What is it that you really care about? How do you want to make progress? What is the current state of the relationship actually causing you or impacting on you or the team? So that sort of frames up why the conversation, like why I'm here, and that sincere, vulnerable request to, hey, come and dance with me for 5 minutes and let's have this conversation.
Yeah, that's really nice, Tone. So what if that feels like it's a bit too far or a bit out of reach and it's a bit too vulnerable and humbling for you to say that? It's a very humble
Which could
approach.
Be for some people, hey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what if you're dealing with power, for example? Sometimes you're going to have to frame it a little differently. And if you're dealing with upline power and you have a concern that you're being seen to overstep the mark, you might want to start with something a little different, which is, I'd like to have a conversation, and what I don't want is to be seen to be overstepping the mark with this. However, I do have a concern I'd like to talk through with you. Would it be okay if we took some time now?
Yeah, isn't that nice?
It is.
And neat.
Yeah, and the breathing and the pausing and the tone is really important with that kind of opener if you're dealing with power.
I think too, respectful.
Yeah, so let's not ignore the fact that most of these happen with some kind of power relationship or politics in place.
Always playing out.
That's right. If you are a keen observer of what's happening around you and you've got some good evidence, you could start with, hey, I'd like to have a chat about something I saw last week. And the reason that I say that is that you're already in the fact zone if you're able to say that I either saw it or heard it, and that can create mutuality quite quickly. It's important to keep your tone nice and level, though. It can't be an accusation, that one.
So in other words, don't point the finger and blame.
Absolutely, because then you've missed out on all of the prep in the first place.
Yeah, makes good sense.
And then finally, there are some conversations that happen between business units or people in other teams you don't necessarily work with. And that's even an authentic way to start something like, although we don't work together that often, I noticed that over the last couple of times we've engaged on a project, it didn't entirely work the way that I thought it could. So would it be okay if we had a chat to enhance the way we work together? And for me, that, I make it sound so easy. The difficulty is in putting that story aside at the start, opening possibility, feeling like, yes, we can achieve something, moving in a constructive mood and getting that tone right. And then just breathing, expressing the what, then the concern, and then asking for the other person to join you in conversation, and then just shutting up and listening. So I hope that this has been a helpful illumination of the question that was asked at our accelerator program in Sydney last week. Chris, if you'd like to comment, we'd love to hear, and we'd love to hear how your conversations go from this point forward. Tony, thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And good luck, Chris. We'd love to know how it goes for you.